Hey guys, it's Lord Lav again, and last week I did a video showing how I like to loop and chop samples like you would do with an MPC on Ableton. This week I'm doing the same thing, but this time doing Logic, doing it in Logic Pro X. Partly because I actually know Logic X a lot better than I know Ableton as a software, but I do find Ableton to be a lot more intuitive. I think it's a lot more obvious how to deal with samples and how to chop samples and so forth than it is with Logic. You can still do all the same things with Logic that you can do in Ableton, but you just have to do it in a slightly different way because it's slightly different software. So that's kind of what this video is about. So I'm going to show you how I personally like to go about looping and chopping samples like you would do with an MPC, but in Logic X, similar to that of Ableton. So we got a clear project here. I am going to bring a sample in, or bring a song in. So audio file, I'm going to use exactly the same song as I used in the Ableton video, and let's have a listen to that now. Love this track. So I've got the file here, and first thing I want to do is start up the loop. The best way to go and do that is to use the marquee tool, which I've got here, by holding down Command, and you also make sure you want your snap mode to be set to smart as well, so things will snap to the nearest transient. And I don't want this beginning, I want it from the ding, the beginning where this big transient is. So I'm going to click the marquee tool there, and that's where the highlight's going to start to show the loop. Then what I want to do, which isn't always obvious, you can manually just decide how much of a loop you want to use, but if you want to be super accurate, then you can hold down Shift and press the arrow keys. So you can see that there, covered there. And if I press that, you can see that it's highlighted the whole section. Now, the reason, normally the way it would do it is it would highlight each individual transient. It would cover each individual transient every time I press down the arrow key, but it's done it all in one hit. And the reason for that is because I've actually used this sample before, and it's kind of memorized the transient flex markers I've used before, but it would still work the same way. So at this point I have a I have a loop here. So what I want to do now is, if I press Command and U, the letter U that is, then that sets the locators for the loop. So let's see how well this works. Yeah, that's not too bad. So then I will press Command and then backslash, and that just holds the loop there. Then at this point, what I want to do is, obviously the BPM is completely wrong at this point and won't fit. So if I've got a file here or a loop, and I want the BPM to, I want the tempo of this to match the BPM, I want to double click on the file, and that brings up this section here down the bottom, and then I will click on Functions and adjust tempo to selection and locators. So I basically want to set this up so this is like a 4-bar loop, because if you remember from the Ableton video, this was like a 4-bar loop. So I want to bring this these locators down to here, 4 bars, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll click on functions again, as I say, and it says adjust tempo by selection and locators. Boom. And it says change tempo of project globally or create tempo change. Click globally, and there we have it, 71 BPM. Now, if I was doing this in Ableton, I'd be setting up warp markers here and so forth to sort of tighten this up a bit so it all fits in. And also, if you remember, the way I did it in Ableton is I actually tried to you warp the file from almost from the beginning, so you make sure it's the correct tempo the minute you bring it in. I haven't done that actually in Logic here. If I remember rightly in the Ableton video, this was actually set to, I set this to 83 BPM. So I'm going to do that now. It's 83 BPM, so it doesn't quite fit in. But what I'm going to do, much like in the Ableton video, is I'm going to get this loop here to actually fit in and match the match these 4 bars this way. So if you remember last time, I had to set warp markers on this file. You basically do the same thing on Logic X. It's flex markers, which kind of work in a similar sort of way. You have certain different algorithms for what flex markers work best. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So we set up the flex mode here. It's gone automatically to monophonic. I know in this case it's best to use polyphonic. So I've got this, you can see this line tool here, and also you can see here the edge of the file. Basically what I want to do is I want to shift this in so it fits within this space. So I'm going to first do a little bit like how in Ableton you set up a warp marker from the back of the audio sample and then squeeze it in. I'm going to do exactly the same here. So squeeze this in like that. That's that done, and it's still going to be a little bit out. So I'm going to add a flex marker here and squeeze that there. And I'm going to add a flex marker here and squeeze that there. Let's see how this works. Yeah, that's pretty good. That'll do. So that's kind of how I would set up a loop. I can add some drums just to test it out as well. Let's go for... any old drums will do, probably. Yeah, so that's basically how I'd go about doing a loop. Now, if I want to go and... again, I often like to do it this way because I'm a bit of a control freak. I like to set a loop that works first before I go chopping it. Despite me having a tendency to chop things in a kind of crazy sort of way. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some more flex markers, and then I'm going to slice by transient and drop that into EXS24 software instruments, so then I can actually play with samples the same way as I did on Ableton. So that's what you're going to see next. So I've gone and added some more flex markers, you can see, in exactly the same sort of places, in exactly the same fashion as I did in the Ableton video, where I would copy the audio file in session view and put it into arrangement view, and then I'd manually chop each bit. I've not actually chopped anything here. I've just decided to manually place in my own flex markers here. You can just another point that's worth mentioning is if you click on the file and press Command and 6, it actually shows this here, shows all the sections where you see all these manual flex markers here, which you can double click on to remove if you like, or you press it again and it will place it there for you. If you press Command and return tool, that will move that back. But yeah, you've always got that option to do that. Again, I've gone and just placed all these flex markers here. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to, whilst the file's highlighted, I'm going to click Control, and then it says Slice at Flex Markers, which is exactly what I want to do. Slice at Flex Markers. So that's that done. And then I'm going to open a software instrument, which is going to be the XS24, which is down here. Put it in stereo mode, and I am going to drag these 12 chops manually into the XS24. Continuous zones, yes, that's what I want, on each note starting at C1. And now I can play with these samples exactly the same way as I did in Ableton. I've got my MPD. The difference here is when you're using Ableton, you can just set the MPD to live, and it will play in line with C1 and everything else. When you're using an MPD on in Logic, you want to set it up to chromatic, but it's pretty much the same setup. So if I remember rightly, the pattern was so we're going to have a go at playing this to some drums, just like I did in Ableton. So I've got the everything set up, and I've set up some drums as well. You can hear that here. Nothing too special, just one of the Apple loops in Logic, and I'm going to just start playing this the same way as I did in Ableton. What I've done here in the XS24, obviously you can see I've brought all these samples in here. One other thing I've done to stop the samples, I've set the samples are set up as a one shot, so it plays the full sample rather than me having to hold down the pads in order for the sample to fully play. I only have to press the pad and it plays the full thing. But I've also set polyphony up to one voice, so that there isn't really any sample overlap. Just so you know. So let's have a go. Let's play it out and see what we get. yeah, so that's basically the same deal as what I did in Ableton. Obviously, at this point, I might edit the MIDI data to make sure it's a bit more in time with the beat, because there's some bits where I trailed off here. But really, the whole point of this video was just to show you how I go about sampling in Logic to get the same sort of effect as I would in Ableton, because Ableton is, I'd say, pretty good and pretty intuitive when it comes to dealing with samples, and it's been quite fun to actually mess around with that. But Logic, it's not always been so obvious as the best sort of ways to deal with it when it comes to looping and sampling stuff. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Check me out on YouTube, subscribe to me on YouTube, or give this video a like as well. Also check me out on Patreon, www.patreon.com/LordLav, and also check out my website, www.lordlav.com. Also, on top of that, if you want to check out my music, check me out on Spotify under Lord Lav as well. Try and keep it real in a post-truth world. Hope you guys are good. More videos and music and stuff to come. Anything you guys want to ask me, if you want me to do a tutorial video on anything in particular, just again, feel free to hit me up in the comments and ask me, and I'll try my best to do it. Anyway, take it easy. Cheers. Peace.